Today, we're going to be turning our boring green screen footage to something completely reimaginable using Blender and After Effects. The first thing we're going to do is import our footage into After Effects. After our clip is imported, we then drag it here to create a new sequence. We then 3D track our camera. What this does is 3D track our footage, so when we move it over to Blender, everything lines up perfectly. After our 3D track is complete, you should see dots all over the screen with a little target. The idea here is to select where it's mainly flat where our subject sits, which this track looks perfect. Set ground plane and origin, then create a solid and camera. And already off the bat, you should see that our 3D track is sticking pretty good to our footage. Now we are going to separate our subject from our background. With this, we're going to use Adobe's Roto Brush. What we can do with Roto Brush is select our subject and we'll see a pink highlight around our subject, which tells us what is being cut out. After your subject is cut out, we then hit play, which is going to perfectly track our mask around our subject. We then press freeze to lock in our track. After your roto is complete, you can go back to your composition layer and see that your footage is perfectly cut out. The next thing we want to do is export this video as a PNG sequence, basically a whole bunch of pictures. If you have Adobe Media Encoder, you can send your footage to render to that and it'll be way faster. Our next step is to import all of our data into Blender. The first thing we want to do is select our camera, transform properties, select everything, press Ctrl C to copy. Go to Blender, and with 82 Blend, you want to create camera. We want to go back to After Effects, double click, copy our focal length, and paste that into our focal length for our camera in Blender. We want to be able to see what we're doing, so we come to our camera, go to background images, add our image of our PNG sequence of our subject. Now we have our subject brought into Blender from After Effects. A quick tip is turning your opacity to 100 and setting it to front so your subject stands in front of the background. Your next step would be creating your 3D world to however you can imagine. The last thing we need to do is bring our footage from Blender into After Effects. To do this, we have to render our animation as a PNG sequence. Then we're going to import that into After Effects. The last thing we do is bring our footage under our subject, scale it up to fit our window, and now our footage should line up perfectly with our rendered background and 3D elements. If you guys want to see more Blender content, make sure you follow and like, and subscribe to the YouTube for a more in-depth tutorial on how we can make it look more realistic and blend seamlessly and perfect.